Hi, I'm Andy Villamarzo with SBLive Sports Florida, and thank you for joining us for our next episode of the Coastal. And we had to bring him back. We told you we would. Dan Laforest with Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show every week. They do a great show. Got to catch it. Dan, thank you for coming on with us.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, pretty exciting times as we blinked and we're already here at the end of the season, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's like we take all this time to talk about it, to hype it up, to go over everything we go over leading into the season and late August, and now it's already beginning of November and it's the end of the season, and you just saw a classic. I know it. Sanford Seminole, Lake Mary. The Seminoles come away with a thrilling win against the Rams, and I know Coach Calhoun over there. Last time we saw him was that Cocoa game. That was a tough game for the Seminoles, but resilient this group is. They were able to win that game over in Boquete, and you got to tell me about it. Just the atmosphere. You called the game, and you talked to Preston Watson, the Duke commitment afterwards. I mean, you got to give me everything from your take about that game.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think for people outside of the Central Florida area, you have to understand this game. I mean, take the records out of it. Sanford and Lake Mary are literally miles apart, and it's a community rivalry. It's a school spirit showdown, and it was every bit of that every time they play. But this year, it was something special to watch. I mean, there aren't too many high school football games anywhere in the state anymore where you're letting people know that they're no longer can fill more people. You know, you've got to go home. And, when you got people lined out outside the gates trying to get in, and then, people just trying to work their way into that environment, it was pretty amazing to watch. But, the game itself did not disappoint. I thought that both of them, it was probably the best football game I've seen in years. Talking about, Lake Mary going up by 14 and Seminole in the fourth quarter battling back. And the irony of that is I still can't figure out, and I haven't asked Coach Calhoun. Seminole scored their first touchdown, and they ended up going for two, but it was, I don't know if it was a botch snap off of the field goal attempt or the extra point attempt, or if it was designed that way. But they ended up going for two right away, which is very uncharacteristic from a strategy standpoint, is to go for two when you're still down a score. I think it was a botch snap. It looked like the snap was a little high. Justin Rosado took off the wide receiver for Seminole and put them up by 2 points, or got them another point closer. So, them getting the ball back. But you're right. I talked to Preston Watson after the game, and why I felt like he was player of the game is, Preston – and John Santucci and I talked about this. I think Preston Watson's probably the best defensive tackle in the state, but he's a 3-star. If he had another inch and a half on his frame, he would be a 4-star defensive tackle. He's committed to Duke. He has a 7.0 GPA or something like that. I mean, the guy's smart. In all seriousness, he did what Preston does, and that is he put Lake Mary's offense where they had to stay in rhythm, and he ended up tipping the ball, which created the interception that gave them the ball back for the go-ahead score.
Yeah, I mean, a game I like to try to be at the best game, or at least a game I feel like could be potentially a really good one. And just seeing the updates from afar, you guys did a live stream of the game and everything. Well done, by the way. Just that Lake Mary Seminole game, you feel like that's a game we're going to see again, because this Class 4M Region 1, Lake Mary and Seminole, they're positioned 1 and 2 in the latest FHSA playoff rankings. You got Lake Mary against Boone potentially for the region quarterfinal, and then you got Seminole against Haggerty. I mean, what do you feel like another matchup between these two teams could be like? Because obviously, I think it would be back at Seminole again because they're district champs. So, I mean, another round of Rams Seminoles, please. I mean, how do you feel that would play out, Dan?
Well, Andy, as I understand it, the only way that plays out is in the first round. So if they met in the later rounds, I believe, because Lake Mary is still a higher seed, it would be at Lake Mary. And I could be wrong. That's how I understand it. But either way, you're talking about two programs that again gear up for each other. Last year we saw it. We saw Seminole win it at Lake Mary during the regular season. Lake Mary comes back and gets the best of those. But when I look at Lake Mary is a very conditioned, very well disciplined program. They have played that way all year long, especially on offense. Noah Grubbs and his crew there, and again, there's a lot of praise going around for Noah Grubbs, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's doing all this as a sophomore. He's playing at levels that just aren't seen it very often. But they're a very well balanced offense, and we saw that in the game. They had a very balanced approach. Offense coordinator Adam Donnelly really has that offense in tune. Seminole on the other side, I still don't think we've seen the best football out of Seminole, to be honest with you, Andy. You brought up the Cocoa game. I thought Seminole, from a talent standpoint, matches up with anybody in the state. But we haven't seen the consistency with Seminole on either side of the ball. And, I thought like it was a great game Friday night, but, it was exactly what we expected it to be. Even Lake Mary going up by 2 scores, there was a sense in the aura that Seminole was still in that game. And I tell you, they played their best football of the season on Friday night.
Well, you want to be peaking at the right time, and towards the end of the season, that's the best time. Seminoles 8-2 to conclude the regular season slate. Now they gear up for the playoffs, and playoffs. You got to talk about them. Great words of Jim Mora. We remember playoffs. And, we got some good matchups here in the potentially in the opening round. This is kind of what it would be if it ended today, right before the FHSA does their bracket reveal on Sunday. But I just mentioned it. Got Boone at Lake Mary, and we're going to go by classification, so highest to lowest. We're going to talk about our other Central Florida teams as well. Boone, Lake Mary, got Mandarin at Apopka, got Evans at Winter Park, and then you got Haggerty at Seminole. Of those 4 matchups, potentially, I'm going to keep using that word a million times. Which one kind of stands out to you the most, Dan?
It's Evans Winter Park. It really is. I think Evans Winter Park is the most intriguing matchup, only because, going back, I was on a local TV show here at the beginning of the season, and they asked me, what was the one team that you expected more than usual? And my answer was Evans. And they're in that same district with Lake Mary, Seminole, Lake Brantley, Apopka, and Evans right now is seated would be at Winter Park. And Winter Park's undefeated. They have an amazing schedule. They have some amazing talent on their team, but they haven't had a tested schedule. And I think the question mark out of all those games is Evans, have they progressed enough playing the talent, the level of competition they have, to possibly ruin Winter Park's plans in the playoffs? I think that's an intriguing storyline, and I think it's a game a lot of people have to take a hard look at.
Yeah, definitely. Just the way they played this season, Winter Park. I mean, and you've told me a lot about Evans all throughout the season. So the Trojans have the talent to pull off. I mean, it would be like a minor upset. I don't think it'd be major, but obviously, anytime you can beat a team that's unbeaten, you got to call it an upset, right? So Evans, Winter Park, and then I don't know. I mean, I got to ask you. I know Popka's your guys there. I mean, do you feel like they got a shot against Mandarin? Do you feel like they could pull off that would be a team that the Mustangs are full of talent. A lot of people kind of had them pegged as a team that could compete for a Class 4M title. Do you think the Blue Darters pull it together and get out of the opening round?
I think what we've learned is we have to look at history, right? When Apopka gets in the playoffs, they become another team. The biggest question mark with Apopka this year, and this is what everybody wants to ask me, what's wrong with Apopka? And the answer is there's nothing wrong with Apopka. They have had a number of injuries this year that have allowed them to play at full strength, starting with quarterback Tyson Davison. He's the same freshman quarterback last year. He was a freshman that took him to the state championship game. Okay. I think you have to give also credit to Coach Jeff Rolson for sticking with the spread this year. You haven't seen a lot of single wing until Tyson got injured. Um, Popka's going through that growing pain. Also, again, start talking about key positions. A lot of youth. They've got a sophomore starting linebacker. They got a sophomore starting quarterback. I think a Popka right now. The question is, first of all, they have to go to Mandarin. Okay, a Popka doesn't care where they play. Can Mandarin win that game? I think that's the question. It's not whether a Popka can win that game. Can Mandarin win that game? Because they're going to come at them with different looks on offense with a single wing, and then Tyson's healthy. And then the other question is on defense. Some of these guys get healthy here at the end of the season. Now, keep in mind, Apopka still got their rivalry game with Wakava this Friday night. So I don't think the question is, can Apopka beat them? I think the question is, can Mandarin beat them?
Yeah, and that explosive offense led by Tramel Jones, and you got Jamie French. I mean, you wonder. It's kind of like strength versus strength. You got offense of Mandarin versus always good defense of Apopka. What happens with that? So be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Now, there is a couple of Central Florida teams in the next region, in Region 2 of Class 4M, and you got Dr. Phillips going to go up against Palm Harbor University, and then you got Olympia against Durant. Now, Travis Gabriel, I know you saw the moment he walked into his office. That was a cool scene we looked at on X. He walked in there, the kids and the staff decorated it for him. Really cool. Titans able to, really create a nice feeling for him on game day last week. And and then Dr. Phillips, a team that's been putting up a bunch of points seemingly every week. And we know they had that just scoring fest with Lake Mary earlier in the season. But I mean, those two games, I mean, what do you think? Which one would be the better one, and who do you feel like is playing better football at this time?
I think you have to take a look at both programs and look at the progression. Obviously, Olympia has a lot of talent on their team, but they were having a hard time kind of feeling each other out, as teammates. I've really seen a lot of progression with Olympia over the last several weeks, including, I called the game with Bobby Allen with Dr. Phillips in Olympia. Olympia, and the same thing with Dr. Phillips. Yes, everybody wants to talk about that shootout with Lake Mary, but honestly, Lake Mary had that game well under control way early in that game. But I saw the progression with Dr. Phillips in the last few weeks. So I think Olympia right now is a dangerous team, because if they can figure it out, if they can figure out that next level type of attitude, they've got a lot of talent on that team. And right now, you've got Juan Gainey as the quarterback. I really love his play, but it's Romello Anthony that has carried that offense this past week through, ran for dang near 300 yards against West Orange.
Yeah, and Coach Gabe made sure I did not forget to have him on our SBLive Florida.
He's texting me on Saturday, trust me.
I mean, that was a huge game by Ware. Definitely put up the yards on the ground, and you got to think.
Did I say Romello Anthony? I meant Romello Ware.
Yeah, that's why I was like, Anthony. I thought it was Romello Ware, but
Romello Ware.
You got to think Ganaeus and Ware.
I was thinking Carmelo Anthony. That's what I was thinking. Us older guys. We got those trends. No, but honestly, Romello Ware is a talented, extremely talented back, and has all the skill sets to play at the next level. And he's proven it on the high school gridiron this season.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to jump into Class 3M in that Region 1. Got some Orlando teams, and obviously the team that's been doing it all season long, week after week, no matter if we like how they kind of, come out. And I say it because I know we've talked on the Central Florida High School Scoreboard show about Edgewater. They're going to face First Coast slated potentially. That's who they would start off with. And then you got a Vito Jones. And then that kind of rounds out the slate with Central Florida teams. But I mean, which matchup do you like better? And just the way Edgewater has played throughout the year, we got to talk a little bit about this undefeated team. Just, do you feel like they got what it takes to get to the state final and face Aquinas?
Let's address the region. It's Edgewater and Jones. I mean, listen, I love what Coach Ordinero has done over at Oviedo. It's really a rematch of last year. Oviedo had to go to Jones. I think Jones is slated to come to Oviedo in this particular scenario. But let's understand, at the beginning of the season, I made 2 comments about this particular region. Number one, Jones is the most talented team around. Okay. And I think they proved that playing Cocoa. They still didn't have it all together. And trust me, Cocoa is legit one of the top teams in the state of Florida, and they've proven it on the field week in, week out. But Jones has just raw talent. Edgewater is the most complete team I've seen. Offense, defense, special teams. Coach Duke has done a wonderful job. He's on his way to have his 2nd straight undefeated regular season. But Coach Elijah Williams has been building this team back and forth. The first 3 games were absolute struggle for Jones. One of them going up to Maryland to play Our Lady of Good Counsel, but there was a number of the kids that were suspended from that game. So I think Jones right now has proven who Jones really can be with the rest of their schedule. And I made this comment weeks ago was Jones doesn't need to win the rest of their games. They need to win the rest of their games in dramatic style, and they've done that. They've blown out just about everybody they played. But again, we're talking about a Jones-Edgewater collision. Throw the records out the door. That game is always set your hair on fire, and I don't expect anything different. I don't care where they play, and right now they've been projected to play at Edgewater. It's going to be what everybody expects to be, except for 2 teams that are at full strength and playing at that high level.
And I know Armwood and Tampa Bay Tech, they want to have something to say. We'll see. But Edgewater and Jones, they're the 2 teams that just perennially have been at this spot. They get to the region final, they get to state semifinals, and we'll see if they able to get there again. And I said Aquinas because they're the team that won it all last year, and they are in a tough region down in 3, and then you got Homestead there. So I guess we'll see if Aquinas is that team, or maybe it is Homestead, or maybe even Coconut Creek. But definitely you got to like Edgewater and Jones in that region 1 there.
And let's go back and talk about Armwood and Tampa Bay Tech. First of all, Coach Jason Roberts over at Tampa Bay Tech, they're always in the mix, right? They're always a part of this discussion. Armwood, I think, has had an amazing season. Those guys are going to be in the mix. I'm just talking about in the event we see a Jones-Edgewater matchup in the playoffs, set your hair on fire. It's going to be something special. You mentioned, let's take it all the way to the end. St. Thomas Aquinas is the standard for this region, or for this classification. But we were talking earlier today, Coconut Creek has had one heck of a season. And again, can they push that envelope? And I think everybody in the state's kind of looking to see what the answer to that question is, because St. Thomas is the king until they're not. So I think what we're looking at, and what I was so impressed with last year, Andy, from a state championship series, I haven't seen state championship games played at that level of competitiveness ever. Yeah. So people can talk about Metro Suburban all day long. At the end of the day, it was about what's on the field, and we saw no blowouts. They were all close games, and the level of competition on every game was amazing. I think that has to be applauded for what we looked at. But no, 3M is going to be a bear to find out who actually squeaks to the end, and they might be limping to that final game with so many great matchups.
Yeah, and I wrote a piece on kind of leading to the end of the season and heading into the playoffs. And Class 3M was a lengthy one to go through, because you want to just say Aquinas will win it all, but then when we really take a look at it in its entirety, there's a lot of you can create an argument, including Edgewater, including Jones, Armwood, Tampa Bay Tech. You go to Coconut Creek. You could even throw Homestead in. They were the state runner-up from last year.
Homestead's another great story, and we've watched them progress over the last 3 years, Andy. They built their way to this.
There's a lot of teams in that classification, because there's some, and it's no disrespect to any teams. We know there's a couple of classifications where we're like, we know that team's probably going to be there at the end, and they're probably, for all intents and purposes, going to win it all. And we're not trying to demean anybody at all, but we're just saying this is a little bit tougher of a classification to just pick a undisputed winner. We're not going to sit there and say, well, they got it hands down. No, there's going to be competition in that region final and state semifinal rounds. And hey, we'll see. We'll see who's the last one standing. But it could be a team from Central Florida, could be Edgewater, could be Jones. We'll see. We'll jump over to Class 2M, and you got Bishop Moore here in Region 1, and I mean, they've been playing. The Hornets have been playing really well this season. I like what Jurgensen. I believe it's Jurgensen
it's Jorn Jurgensen.
Yeah, I'm like, my gosh, I should have let you say his name because I knew I was going to butcher it. But he's been playing really well. Tell me a little bit about Bishop Moore heading into the postseason. They would be against a Episcopal School of Jacksonville. I did not say that great, but give me a take on that.
So Bishop Moore, we currently have them ranked as our #1 private school in our rankings, even with 3 losses, because they're amazing 3 quality losses. But I like the youth at Bishop Moore. There's not a lot of senior guys there. Nolan Monroe, wide receivers, obviously one of them, but Yorn is a junior. I love Jake Cruel. I love Trenton Gummer. I love some of the young talent at Bishop Moore, which is scary because they're going to be back next year. So you start taking a look at what Coach Hedrick and his staff have done. You have to give them a lot of kudos. I think Bishop Moore right now is playing really good football, and can they make some noise and get through a few of these rounds? And again, being in that region, it's Jacksonville heavy. It's the only Orlando team filled up with a bunch of Jacksonville teams. So a lot of travel there, and that's always a concern when you're game planning is how much are you going to be on the road?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the suburban teams, and I know the coverage goes out to the Treasure Coast area, and you do got some matchups over there. You got Kissimmee Osceola against Treasure Coast. DeLand would be playing Vero Beach. University against New Smyrna Beach. Those are a lot of good games, Dan. Which one kind of stands out to you most?
If it's DeLand and Vero Beach, I'm watching it. In fact, I may go to that because, again, I've seen DeLand a couple times this year. I saw them play against the undefeated Mainland Buccaneers in game week 1. And then we saw them play oh my God, it was a shootout with Sanford Seminole. I mean, when was the last time you had a Rick Darlington team put up 42 points against a Seminole defense? And they lose 49-42. But, I like the fundamentals of DeLand. Vero Beach has had an amazing season, and really when you take a look at one of their key losses against Seminole and you compare that DeLand game, I think that's if you just take that alone, I think that's an amazing matchup. It's going to be fun, and we can even talk about Mainland.
Oh yeah, we can't. I mean, can't not talk about Travis Rowland's team. You got Class 3S Region 3 there. They would start off against Fort Pierce Westwood to start the playoffs as a #1 seed, potentially in that region. You got Rockledge, Jensen Beach, Sebring, Merritt Island, Ugali against Satellite. But the Buccaneers kind of doing a lot of the same behind a new starting quarterback, Dennis Murray Jr. He's been really kind of everything they want out of a dual threat kind of guy. And then LJ McCray has been leading that defense. Dan, I mean, are we seeing a potential another run to states out of Mainland here? I mean, what's your feelings?
I believe so. I think Coach Rowland learned a lot from, them being in the championship game last year. What I see from Mainland, and I'm going to go into what's going to happen Friday night, and this is the next game we're actually going to be broadcasting on the Cure Bowl YouTube channel, is Lake Mary at Mainland. And I think this is going to be a window into the future here because you're talking about a Lake Mary high-powered offense. Mainland has not seen a high-powered offense yet this season, okay? Mainland's high-octane defense. You're right. LJ McCray, Isaiah Shine, those guys are playing some serious ball. If they can slow down Lake Mary's offense, I think that really tells you a lot of where they are. and vice versa. Lake Mary coming off a tough loss to Seminole. I'm excited for this game because I expect the best of both programs. But what I'm getting to is, I think Mainland right now, if they can win this Lake Mary game, they run the table in 3S.
Yeah, and I feel like them,
even if they don't, I think they learn enough from it, because DJ Murray, you mentioned him. That kid is the glue that has made that offense work all season long. When in doubt, give him the ball, whether he throws it down the field or he's running it with his legs. Andy, you're absolutely correct.
And I got to see them against Bartram Trail, and just the kind of playmaker he is just using his legs when he needs to buy more time to find somebody open down the field. That's what makes him just such a dynamic playmaker for the Buccaneers. And that's where you're kind of like, that's the change from last year, the way they were last year with Harrell and Creasy and those guys. They just were able to kind of get up and down the field vertically. They can do it vertically, but they do it on the ground as well, and they do it with a variety of backs. So the Buccaneers on their way possibly to another run towards the state championship. Maybe they'll see Lake Wales again, because the Highlanders are playing pretty good too.
I think you bring up a good point, Andy. Is let's go back to that running game. Mainland's offensive line is one of the best I've seen, and I'm talking about stacked from end to end. I think that's the key for how they're going to set the pace of a game, is running the football and misdirection. And that's where Dennis Murray really comes in. But it starts and ends with that offensive line, by the way.
Yeah, that offensive line was impressive. That night they were kind of able to control the line of scrimmage against the Bears. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching that with the Lake Mary, seeing how that kind of plays out. And you guys got a good one to end the regular season. Let's jump to Class 2S. This is one of those classes.
Coco.
Yeah. Coco. We're just, it's almost like it's one of those classifications. It's like Class 1M, where everybody's saying Chaminade Madonna. And I wrote that kind of end of the year piece talking about Coco, and just that game that we all saw against Sanford Seminole. I felt like that kind of showed you the resiliency, just how this team is when the cards are down, everything's against them, and in terms of just like going through a tough situation, trying to get through adversity. You get Coach Ryan Schneider out of the game. Obviously, they're up against one of the best defenses in Florida, and all Brady Hart and that offense find a way to do is win by 20 plus points, and they hold Sanford Seminole to 3. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like this is just a foregone conclusion that the Tigers are going to be hoisting the state championship in Tallahassee?
I think we have to just understand their whole progression. First and foremost, mentioned the name Brady Hart. Again, a sophomore phenom quarterback. And what Ryan Schneider, what he can do with a quarterback, what he did with Blake Boda last year, what he's done with Brady Hart. But the supporting cast, let's understand. Let's go back to that St. Thomas Aquinas game. How many yards did Coco rush in that game? I think I can count them at least on my hands or my feet. Brady Hart carried Coco against that St. Thomas defense. Okay. And that's not saying they can't run the ball. The wide receiver talent, the offensive line, that offense is scary good. And we talked about the Seminole game. Again, I don't think Seminole played well at all against them. Going back to the Jones game, I thought that was a preview of two great teams equally matched from a talent standpoint. But Coco is scary good when they are ready to play 100%. And I think that was a lot of what Coach Schneider was kind of frustrated with, is he didn't see the effort that week out of his team to be a number one program, and he demands that every week.
Yeah, you could definitely feel that intensity from him, kind of why his team couldn't get up in the opening half. And the second half, and we talked about it. We felt like maybe, and it's not why he got ejected, but you felt like maybe he was trying to do something on his own and to kind of inspire the troops to kind of rally.
Whatever it worked. I mean, they ended up breaking loose and obviously taking control of that game. But again, I think Coco is so good that, it's very hard to schedule, put together a schedule that challenges that talent that they have over there week after week. But They're that good, believe it.
Well, you heard it. They're that good. He said Coco a few times. So if you're not buying into it, you got to buy into it. Dan, just close things out here. Give me one thing that you feel like you learned that you didn't feel like you already knew before this season. What's one thing you've learned through these first 10 weeks? Because I can't say 11 because we haven't played it yet. But first 10 weeks, what do you feel like you learned that you didn't already know?
Um, just understanding. We see so much coaching turnover here in the state of Florida. I what I've learned is we've got some great young coaches coming up through the ranks. You mentioned, we keep talking about Seminole. Well, Coach Carl Calhoun's a first-year head coach, and one of the things I've told a lot of new head coaches is you don't know till you know. And I thought, how he's handled his first year as a head coach has been amazing. You talk about Evans, Coach Carlos Odom takes over an Evans program that struggled mightily over the last several years, over the last decade, if you will, 2 decades. And now they're playoff eligible. I think that's a huge leap and bounce there. But you have the veteran coaches out there that are still, doing very well. And those are your high level coaches. Look at Palm Bay or Titusville. Titusville's perfect. Titusville 7-1, 8-1 right now. Going into the end of the season, they haven't. What was it? 40 years since they had a winning program. Or you start taking a look at culture changes, and what's happening with some of these new coaches, and I think that's the one thing that I've learned is, even though we're starting to see a lot of coaches turnover, we're seeing a lot of young coaches stepping up and doing a really good job developing programs and developing young men.
Well, there's certainly has a lot of turnover, but there has been a lot of good young head coaches that have emerged out of this season, and I can definitely agree with that. Well, Dan, thank you once again for coming on the Coastal, and I'm sure we'll be talking. I'm sure we'll talk during the playoffs, and it's setting up to be an exciting one.
It's been a pleasure as always, Andy.
All right. Well, that's Dan Laforest with the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show. Catch their game on Friday night, Lake Marion Mainland. That's going to be a really good one. If you can't get to it, watch their live stream. It's I'd say it's got to be game of the week here in the state of Florida. So for Dan Laforest, I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a good one. So for Andy Villamarzo, SBLive Sports Florida, thank you for joining us for our latest episode of The Coast.